Welcome back. Today in our Lightroom Classic workshop, we're going to start working with masks in Lightroom Classic. This is a very creative and fun way to precisely edit your images. Lightroom Classic masking coming up. Hi, I'm Terry Vanderheiden, professional photographer, and I'm teaching you Lightroom Classic 2025 from the very beginning. We're in episode 7 in our beginner's workshop on Lightroom Classic. Now, if you've missed any of the previous episodes and you want to catch up, just head over to my video channel, navigate to playlists, go to Lightroom Classic Beginners, and you'll find the entire workshop series right there. Today begins our journey into masking into Lightroom Classic. Masking will allow you to do some very precise edits while using some of the tools you already know how to use. So let's get started. So we're back inside of Lightroom Classic, and let's pick up where we left off. We have this image of Yosemite Valley, and let's say we want to do some more precise edit. We've talked about lightening and darkening that we can do with our basic panel, but let's go into the Develop module. And let's go in now. What you'll see here over on this side, you have those sections here we've talked about, the basic panel, cropping, remove, that red eye tool that nobody uses, and the masking tool. So let's click on that. And that gives us a whole new dialog of information that we can work with in terms of our masking. So across the top, we've got subject, sky, background. These are things that Lightroom uses AI to determine what is the background or what is the sky. And they're really cool and they work pretty darn good. So let's take this situation here. We're going to click on sky. And what it'll do is it's going to detect the sky and figure out how, okay, look, see how that turned all red? So what that red means is that whatever effect we decide to put on this, it's going to affect just the red area. So all this area here that's not red is not going to be affected. And you can kind of see what Lightroom did. Let's go ahead and zoom up just a little bit. We'll move this around. See how the sky is red, but we also have a little bit of fall off, a little bit of drift over onto the mountaintop. And the reason it does this is because it's trying to create a mask that looks realistic. If it was super sharp across here, it might not look realistic. So this is how this works. And it'll take tones like the blue from the sky, which is going to be reflected across parts of the mountains. It's going to actually end up creating whatever we do is going to also affect those as well. The couple things about masking. So down here, we can show our pins. So a pin is going to let us know that we have actually done a mask in that area. So we're going to leave this on always just for now. Generally, I leave it on never because I kind of am used to it, but as you're getting started, you want to be able to know where your masks are. So let's go ahead and just put it on always. And you see that little pin up there? And it's a little pin. We'll zoom up on it here. You can see that little pin kind of looks like, oh, that's a sky. So that we know that's a sky pin. That's showing us the sky mask rather. And that's going to be just signifying that that is created for us to work with. So you can look over here, and this is, let's see if we can expand this a little bit. You can see here that area up white, that has been masked. So that's all the sky that's been masked here. So Lightroom has said, okay, this is the area that we think you want to work in, and we're calling it the sky mask. So we have down here, we have add and subtracts. Okay, so what an add and subtract does, it allows us to add and subtract from a actual mask. So in this case, let's go ahead and zoom back up. And let's say, see on Half Dome here, it's pretty, there's a lot of pink in it. Let's say we want to remove that. So what we do is we come up here to subtract. And once we hit subtract, we're going to get this long list of different styles of things that we can work in, right? What do we want to use to work to get rid of that, right? Well, the obvious answer here is the brush, because that's the most defined tool that we can work with. And we're going to take this brush, and you can see that in the center of that dot now is a negative sign or minus, right? So as we click and paint, you can see that we're removing that mask from halftone. Now you can also see that we kind of went over there a little bit. So let's undo that and try that again. So subtract, and we're going to use the brush tool. Now over here on the right, we have different brush parameters. Of course, we already know how we can make a brush larger or smaller. You can make it larger or smaller with the bracket keys, but also see this inner circle there? That inner circle is the feather. And if I come over here and I start looking at the feather, you can change how much, see how that's much tighter? How tight of a brush you want. Do you want a real sharp brush, or you want one that is feathered off? So that's going to be an important feature that you're going to want to work with when you're working with your brushes from time to time, is how do you want this to feather? And of course you can look in the over here, you can also control the flow of how much this paint we're going to take away, as well as the density. So let's just use it as it is. We'll use this minus tool, but down here is a thing called auto mask. And this is a really cool feature that Lightroom offers us. So let's click on that. And what the auto mask does is it will grab an area and only work in that area. So let's see how it works here on this mountaintop. So we're going to click here on side and see how it's starting to whiten up. Look at that. We're not going over into the sky. Well, very little right there. Let's see about over here. Let's click. Look at that. It does a pretty tight mask because it's using the tone that you started clicking on, and it will decide whether that is the tone that you want to continue working with. And it actually does a really great job with the auto mask on, in terms of making sure that that horizon is exactly what we want. So let's come in here. Now we can always make the brush a little smaller and take that area out. Wherever you click, so like here, this is dark gray. When we click here, it's going to look at that area. When we click here, that's going to be white, and it's going to separate that from the sky. So this is a way that you can remove things from the sky. Now, obviously here, if we want to zoom in even a little bit more, we can see we didn't do a perfect job, but let's go ahead and click this off, turn the auto mask off. So this starts to get a little risky here, but we can just come in here and remove that, all right? So you can see there's little fade areas of pink, and that's because the auto mask was just trying to do its best job of trying to create this mask while keeping it on the same tone that you originally clicked on. So let's go over here, and we're going to go to add, right? So we did subtract, we subtracted from the mask, but here we can add to the mask. And again, we'll use the brush. Let's add with the brush. And we can add masking back in if we want. So you notice when we hover over our little pin, this is that pin that I showed you earlier. If we hover over the pin, we can see what it looks like with just that mask on. So you can get as refined as you want on these masks. So let's zoom out, and we'll just go ahead and do some rough changes on here. We're going to do subtract. We're going to use our brush. We're going to use the auto. And let's just go through and just make sure that the mountaintop, make a nice big brush. Make sure that the mountaintop isn't part of our mask. So I'm just hitting the space bar, turns it into a little hand, lets me move it around a little bit. So we're just going through, making sure that we're not masking any of the mountain, we're just masking the sky. And this is dependent on what you're doing, right? You know, so if you want to do something really refined, this is how you do it. If you want to do something simple, you just let Lightroom tell you where the mask is on the sky and just leave it alone and then do your work. So let's come up to the top here of El Capitan. And again, we're just going to remove any of that masking details across the top. Okay. So let's pull back, and you can see we've done a decent job. We haven't done a perfect job yet, but that takes a little bit of time. But you can see here what we've done on this mask. We've got our original mask here, which is our sky mask. And then we have all these brushes, and if we hold on it, watch, it just shows us the areas that we're working on. There's the sky. There's a brush that we did around Half Dome. Here's a brush that we did that's also around halftone. And then of course this is a bridge across the ridge, a brush across the ridge. So you can see what all these things are doing, which is pretty cool. So now what we want to do is, now that we've done this, we've created a mask, let's go ahead and do something to the mask. So if we pull down here, we can go to any of our sliders that we had that we've used before. Let's just take exposure, for instance. Now watch what happens. Right now we're looking at a pink sky because Lightroom is showing us that there's a mask there. So if we didn't want to see that, we could come over here and we could change it to any of the other versions that you would like, image on black and white, whatever. Color overlay is really the simplest way to go. Now, we like the mask, for instance, but now we're going to do an effect. As soon as we move one of these sliders, any of these sliders, that mask is going to go away. So let's go ahead and take our exposure and just bring it down. So that's a simple way that we can darken that sky. And we have masked it out. And obviously, you can get as refined as you want. But you can see here that it still looks pretty good. And if we didn't want to see those little pins there, we can just click this over here and go to never. And now we don't have to look at those pins. We can actually look at the image. This is also a floating box that you can take and move around. Just grab it and move it somewhere else where it's not in your way so you can see the image. So that's a simple way to create a sky mask. Now let's go over here, and when you're ever going to doing masks, for instance, if you're ready to make a second mask, we'll leave this here for a second. Ready to make a second mask, you don't click over here. It's not going to allow you to make a second mask there. But right here, where it says create a new mask, that's where you make your second mask on the same image. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll click this. Then it says, what kind of mask do you want? Well, let's go ahead and just do a radial gradient. So a radial gradient is similar to what you might think it would be. It's going to give you a little disc. So watch, as we click and drag, you can see how that, and if we do it, we're still keeping the click of the mouse down. You can make it wider, taller, whatever it is that you want in terms of a mask. So let's say we're just going to mask out Bridal Veil Falls. So as we let it go, you can see that we have masked that. Now let's go back to our pins and go back to always. And now what happens, we get all of our details of our mask. So we can take this and move it around. Okay, we don't have to leave it there. If we'd like to rotate it, well, look at when we put our mouse on the outside, we get those little double arrows. Click, and then we can change the angle of that little rotation. This area here, the space between the inside and the outside is your feather, right? So that's how much it falls off. If you want to increase that, you can do a couple things here. First, if you want to grab these buttons, you can change the size. And then this mask here will allow us to alter whatever our feather is. So we grab this little red dot, and now we can change our feather. So that's a real soft feather. This is a much sharper feather. So this allows us to create a mask in an area, and we can actually, really highlight something this way. So let's come on back over to exposure again, and let's brighten that up. So let's go ahead and just turn this off for a second. And you can see that we can brighten that area up or darken that area, whatever we wanted to do. So let's go ahead and brighten it just a little bit. Now what I want to do is we've created this mask, right? And this is a radial gradient, really super useful mask, probably one of my favorites. And if we wanted to do a couple of things that would affect this, let's go over here to these three dots and click on that. Now we can do a second mask. And the way we're going to do this is we could invert this and only work with the outside of that mask, or we can do duplicate and invert. And this is what I like to do, is duplicate and invert, because that gives me a second mask to work with. So let's click on that. And you can see here, we've selected everything but what was inside of that original mask. So let's go ahead and bring all our exposure down a little bit. And so with this, we're able to create a mask that brings a highlight right to that, like there's a beam of sunlight on that, right? And so we can come over here with these little eyeballs and turn that stuff off and see what we like. Now, what's also nice about this is we can name these, right? So we can come in here and name this. So let's go ahead and name this everything but falls. Okay, so that is showing the mask, which is everything but the falls. This one, mask 2, we can name falls. So we can see on our mask exactly what it is that we're working on in this given image, right? We have, this is our sky mask, right? So let's go ahead in here and we're going to retype that. Double click on it, and then you have the ability to name it. Now, naming is super important in terms of if you want to come back to this image another time and do more work on it, right? Because that might be something, you got something else to do, we're going to close this out. Well, you can come back and you can see exactly what it is that you're doing based on what you have titled all of those masks. Now, as you probably know, in Lightroom, when you're doing work on an image, you don't have to save it. It will just save automatically. You don't have, there's no saving to be done here. All of your image, no matter what kind of work you do on your image, it's going to automatically save. So that's a really cool feature. So it enables us to go ahead and do whatever work we want. And then when we come back, these will all be in order. So let's go ahead and put that back up here where we started with it. And let's go ahead and do a little comparison. That was before we started doing any masks. And this was after we did some masks. So you can see that this masking is so cool. I mean, being able to create a mask to do whatever it is you want, it's fantastic. So here's another example of what you might do, and we're going to add a mask. So we're going to come over here and add a mask? No, that's not how you add a mask. That's only how you make your very first mask, is that little disc. From then on, you always do create a new mask over here. So we'll click on this, and this one we're going to do a linear gradient. And what a linear gradient does, you'll see here, that just does a straight angle wash, and you can see it fades out. And so let's go ahead and let this go. And we'll make sure that our pins are on. Let's go over to always. And you can see here that this is our definition of our mask. So we can grab the center and move the entire mask around. We can grab this little button here and rotate it. We can also pull it straight down and make that gradation a little less. But you can see what we've done here is that we've now made a mask down at the lower part. So let's say we want to darken that. We can darken that. And then the graduation of darkness comes up from the bottom. And even after we've done any work, if we want to alter that, we can make it a little bit bigger. We can bring the mask up. We can rotate it. And it'll rotate all of the same stuff that we're doing. If we want to do just a corner, this allows us to do this. Now, what's really nice is so now you can see our mask up here, and we hover over it, it goes red. Let's go create another one. We'll do another linear gradient. So we can come over here and make our one from this side. And we'll rotate it a little bit. And maybe we don't want it quite that deep. So we'll come down over here. And we like this, except of course, look, it's affecting the sky. So how do we do that? We come up to subtract, we grab our brush, and we just brush that away. So now we've got a gradient on just this mountainside. We can go ahead and do whatever we want. Let's go ahead and darken it again. So we can darken that edge. So you can see what kind of control you have with masks, right? We've just gone through, we've made several masks on the same image, and you can make new masks as you go. Almost every image that I create is going to have some sort of a mask because I want to precisely edit these images and create the tones and the look that I'm looking for, right? I don't want to have to just be set with how the image looks originally. I want to be able, and a lot of times when I'm shooting, I'm looking at things to try to say, oh, how am I gonna do this on when it's finally done? When I have an area maybe that I see is too bright, it's like, oh, I can take a mask later and bring that down. So I know as I'm shooting, I'm thinking a little bit about masks as we go. If you're enjoying this content, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the little bell icon so you'll be notified of my next video when it's released. I always read and respond to all the comments, so feel free to leave a question, suggestion, or feedback in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. Your videos often inspire new video ideas, so go ahead and keep those coming because that helps me create more content that you're looking for. Now, you can always reach out to me via email. That's terry@imagelight.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions and put you on my mailing list, so I'll notify you that way of future videos when I release them. Also, this last week, I started releasing new episodes for the Nature Photography Podcast. You can find it on any of your podcasts. Just type in the Nature Photography Podcast and go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen, and you'll pop up and you'll get to hear some audio versions of some of my content. It's quite a bit different than here, but I think you'll like it. All right, so I have a new image up here, and let's go ahead and do a little bit of masking with this. Let's go and develop and click our mask. Remember, we're going to come over here for our very first mask, and we're going to click on this, and what do we want to try this time? Let's try subject. Let's click subject, and look what it did. Lightroom used AI and figured out that that's the subject that we want to work on. And of course, we can come in here and we can change the exposure. We can come in and change the color if we wanted a little more yellow in those feathers, a little more magenta. We can make it a little more orange if we want. We can do whatever we want to this image, and we can actually create the look that we're looking for. So again, just like we did before, let's go in here, click these triple dots, come down and go to duplicate and invert the mask. So now it's everything but, right? This is not the subject, but everything but. So let's go ahead and darken that a little bit. Maybe make it a little bluer. And one of the ways to do that is to move our temp down. So now we've made that a little bluer. And you can see this is a relatively quick way to work, right? We'll let Lightroom do a lot of the work by making our selections of our masks, and we're able to go in and create whatever it is that we're looking to do in a real quick fashion. So having the ability to have these masks, and there's all kinds of masks to work with. And as we go through, you'll see that we can do any of these things. All of these parameters that we have inside of Lightroom are available inside of a mask, right? We can do any of the things that we want. We've talked a little bit about clarity and texture and dehaze, so we can actually we can take our background, for instance, and soften it. So we can move that texture back. We can move the dehaze back. We can move clarity back. And now look what's happened. We've got, let's see if we can turn this off. That's what we started with. And now this is where we're at. So we've softened the background, made it a little more blue, and then, just brought more attention to the subject. And you saw how long that took. That didn't take that long at all. So being able to go through masks and again, do some experimenting. I think you're going to find this a lot of fun. Working with masks is a great way to really refine your edits inside of Lightroom Classic. So next time we're going to work on mask, and we're going to work with the brush, solely with the brush, because that's an amazing tool that you can work with. You can do a lot of different things with it. So next time we get back, we're going to work on masking with brushes. See you then.